Your phone was on the charger for 8 hours last night. You didn't touch it once. Screen off, no notifications, no apps open. And yet, you woke up to find 15 or 20% of your battery already gone before you even unlocked the device. It wasn't a game running in the background. It wasn't a video you forgot to close. Something reached into your phone while you were asleep and quietly spent your power, hour after hour, without asking permission. And here's the part almost nobody checks. The culprit isn't a rogue app or a virus. It's a setting buried inside an app you trust completely. The Google Play Store. Not a shady third-party tool, the official one, the one every Android phone ships with, the one you've never once thought to open and inspect. That's the strange part of this story. Most people spend hours chasing battery drain in the wrong place. They close background apps obsessively. They dim their screen. They turn on battery saver mode and convince themselves the problem is solved, only to wake up the next morning to the same mystery drain. What they never do is open the Play Store itself, tap their profile picture, and look at what's quietly configured in there by default. Because on the surface, the Play Store looks like a static, boring app. You open it, you download something, you close it. It doesn't feel like the kind of app that could be running in the background all night, waking your processor up every few minutes, checking servers, downloading files, scanning your device. But that is exactly what it's doing, and for millions of Android users right now, in the middle of 2026, this is happening on a scale large enough that Google itself has had to step in and build an entire enforcement system to deal with it. Here's where it starts making sense. On a healthy Android phone, when you open settings and go to battery usage, the screen display should sit comfortably at the top of the list, using more power than anything else, because a lit-up screen is the single biggest drain on any phone. That's expected. That's normal. But on a growing number of devices, that's not what people are finding. Instead, they're finding Google Play services sitting near the top of the list, sometimes above the display itself, sometimes using more battery overnight than an actual video call would use during the day. And when people search for what Google Play services even is, most of them come away more confused than before. Because Play services isn't really an app in the way WhatsApp or Instagram is an app. It's a background framework that almost every other app on your phone quietly depends on, and it rarely misbehaves on its own. When it spikes, it's almost always because something else is leaning on it too hard, and that something else, in a huge number of documented cases, traces back directly to the Play Store's own configuration. Read that again. The Play Store isn't just a storefront where you download things. It is a persistent background service tied directly into Play services, silently checking for updates, silently scanning installed apps, silently syncing your library across devices, and doing all of this on a schedule that most users never configured themselves because it was set for them the moment they signed into their Google account. Nobody hands you a manual explaining this. Nobody warns you during setup. It's simply switched on, quietly, by default, and left running in the background for the entire lifetime of your device, unless you go digging for it yourself. So let's dig. Open the Play Store, tap your profile picture in the top right corner, and go into Settings. Inside, there's a section called Network Preferences, and inside that is a toggle called Auto Update Apps. On most phones, this is set to one of three options: over any network, over Wi-Fi only, or don't auto-update apps at all. And here's the detail that changes everything. On a large number of devices, especially phones that have been factory reset, freshly purchased, or restored from a backup, this setting defaults to over any network. That means your phone doesn't wait for Wi-Fi. It doesn't wait for you to be near a charger. At any hour, on any connection, the moment your phone detects that an installed app has a new version available, the Play Store wakes up, opens a connection, downloads the update, verifies it, installs it, and closes again. And it does this for every single app on your phone that has a pending update, one after another, silently while you sleep. Think about what that actually means on a modern phone. The average Android user has somewhere between 60 and 90 apps installed. Even if only 5 or 6 of them push an update in a given week, that's still 5 or 6 full download and install cycles running invisibly, each one waking the radio, waking the CPU, writing to storage, and re-indexing the app. Multiply that pattern across a week, across a month, across the entire lifespan of the phone, and you start to understand why so many users are seeing battery percentages drop overnight for reasons they can never quite explain. It's not one dramatic event. It's not a single app misbehaving in some obvious, easy-to-spot way. It's a quiet, repeating cycle, engineered for convenience, running in the background exactly the way it was designed to. Except the convenience comes at a cost nobody explained to you when you accepted the defaults. But here's where it gets worse. Updating apps isn't the only thing happening inside that network preferences menu. Sitting right alongside auto updates is the setting for auto-playing videos in the Play Store. Another for downloading over mobile data with limits, and buried deeper in the app's general settings on many builds is a toggle sometimes labeled App Install Optimization. Independent testing by Android battery researchers has shown that when this optimization setting is left in its default state alongside auto updates being enabled, Google Play services can sit at around 3% of total battery usage purely from background install and update activity. Or to turn both off, and that number on the same device drops to under 1%. That's not a rounding error. On a phone with a full day's battery budget, the difference between 1% and 3%, repeated day after day, is the difference between a phone that comfortably survives to bedtime and one that leaves you searching for a charger by 6 in the evening. And this is where everything changes, because auto updates are only one half of the story. The other half is scanning. Every Android device with Google Play services installed runs a built-in protection layer called Google Play Protect, which continuously checks the apps on your phone against Google's threat database, looking for malware, misbehaving permissions, and apps sourced from outside the Play Store that might be dangerous. This is a genuinely useful security feature, and turning it off completely is not something anyone should casually recommend. But the scanning itself is not free. It runs periodic checks, sometimes triggered right after you install something new, sometimes triggered on a routine schedule you never see, and on certain devices, users have documented these scans becoming unusually CPU intensive, especially on phones that sideload apps outside the Play Store or that have unusually large app libraries. When you combine scheduled security scans with scheduled auto updates with scheduled library syncing, you don't get 3 small, harmless background tasks. You get an overlapping pattern of wake-ups that can stack on top of each other at almost any hour of the night. And each one, individually small, adds up to something your battery percentage cannot hide from you by morning. What most people are not seeing is that this isn't a fringe complaint from a handful of unlucky users. It has become common enough and consistent enough across enough devices that Google itself has been forced to publicly acknowledge the pattern and build a system specifically to police it. And this is the part of the story that turns a simple settings tip into something much bigger. Starting March 1st, 2026, Google began enforcing a brand new policy across the entire Play Store, one built specifically around background battery drain. Using a metric Google calls the excessive partial wake lock, first tested quietly in beta back in April 2025, Google now tracks exactly how long any given app keeps a phone's processor awake after the screen is turned off. Not while you're using it, not while it's playing music or tracking your delivery in real time. Specifically, the period after the screen goes dark, when your phone is supposed to be idle, cooling down, sipping power. If an app crosses roughly 2 hours of this kind of wake lock activity within a single 24-hour period, it starts collecting warning flags inside its developer's dashboard. And if that pattern continues for 28 straight days without correction, the app doesn't just get a quiet warning anymore. It gets a visible public label on its own Play Store listing, right next to the install button, reading something close to, "This app may use more battery than expected due to high background activity." Its ranking drops. It gets pulled out of discovery and recommendation sections. It becomes, in effect, publicly named as one of the phone's silent battery thieves, for every future downloader to see before they even install it. Think about the scale required to justify a policy like that. Google doesn't build a global enforcement system, complete with its own dashboard, its own scoring metric, and its own public shame label, for a handful of edge cases. It builds something like this when the telemetry across billions of Android devices shows a pattern too large and too consistent to ignore. And the uncomfortable irony sitting underneath all of this is that the very background behavior Google is now punishing other developers for, apps waking the phone unnecessarily, running silent cycles after the screen turns off, consuming power the user never explicitly authorized, is structurally the same category of behavior the Play Store itself has been quietly doing through its own default settings for years. Google built the enforcement system to catch other developers doing exactly what its own auto update and scanning cycles have been doing under a different name on almost every Android device on the planet by default, since before most of us ever thought to check. This is not chaos. This is a system quietly correcting itself in public, one policy announcement at a time, while most users remain completely unaware that they've been living inside the very pattern that policy was built to fix. And the story doesn't stop at the software layer. Because starting in early 2026, this same underlying battery mechanism began colliding with specific hardware bugs on some of the most popular Android phones sold today, and the timing makes the whole picture even harder to ignore. On Pixel devices from the Pixel 6 all the way through the Pixel 10, Google publicly acknowledged on April 14, 2026, that a GNSS module, the chip responsible for GPS location tracking, was failing to properly enter sleep mode after a March 2026 software update. That failure kept the phone's processor artificially awake far longer than it should have been. And because Google Play Services is the layer that manages location requests system-wide, the battery usage screen on affected phones showed Play Services and mobile network standby, both spiking dramatically. Exactly the symptom users had already been complaining about for unrelated reasons. Google's May 2026 patch did not fix the underlying issue. As of the most recent guidance, a full fix isn't expected until Android 17 reaches stable release on June 15, 2026, leaving affected Pixel owners with a temporary workaround, manually forcing their network setting to LTE instead of 5G to reduce how aggressively the modem and GPS chip interact. Samsung owners haven't been spared either. Throughout January 2026, Galaxy S25 and S25 Ultra users on Samsung's own community forums reported the same elevated Play Services drain, and several One UI 7 beta participants traced it specifically to background GPS polling behavior. For most of those users, the same fix that helps everyone else, going into each app's individual battery settings and restricting unnecessary location and background permissions, resolved the majority of the drain, though Samsung's own permanent correction wasn't expected until a later One UI 8 patch. Notice what's happening here. Two of the most popular Android device families on the market, built by two different manufacturers, running two different versions of Android, ended up converging on nearly identical battery symptoms within the same few months, both traced back to the same overlapping category of background service behavior tied to Play Services, location, and automatic background activity. That is not a coincidence you can explain away with just restart your phone. That is a systemic pattern spanning the entire Android ecosystem in real time, unfolding as we speak. So what does all of this actually mean for the phone sitting in your pocket right now, today, in the middle of 2026? It means the mysterious overnight battery drain you've been quietly frustrated by for months might not be a hardware fault, and it might not even be your phone getting old. It might simply be a handful of default settings switched on the day you first signed into your Google account, working exactly as designed, exactly as intended by the people who built them, quietly assuming you'd rather have instant automatic updates and continuous background security. Scans, than a few extra percentage points of battery by morning. Nobody asked you which trade-off you'd prefer. The decision was made for you, silently, the moment you tapped sign in. Here's where the story turns from mystery into something you can actually act on, and this is the part worth paying close attention to, because the fix takes minutes, not hours. And it doesn't require rooting your phone, installing a sketchy battery booster app, or doing a full factory reset. Open the Play Store. Tap your profile icon in the top right. Go into Settings, then Network Preferences, then Auto Update Apps. If it's currently set to over any network, change it to over Wi-Fi only. Or if you're comfortable manually checking for updates yourself, switch it to Don't Auto Update Apps entirely. This single change stops your phone from silently downloading and installing app after app at random hours throughout the day and night, and instead limits that activity to when you're connected to a stable, unmetered Wi-Fi network, which is typically when your phone is also plugged in or sitting idle at home anyway. While you're still inside that settings menu, look for autoplay videos and disable that too, since it forces the Play Store to preload and silently play video previews as you scroll, which burns both data and battery for content you may never even watch. Then back out to the main settings screen and look for anything labeled around install optimization or background processes. And where available, disable it. Independent testing has shown this single combination, turning off auto updates over any network and disabling install optimization, can cut Google Play Services' share of total battery usage from roughly 3% down to under 1% on the same device, which sounds small until you remember that number compounds every single day you own the phone. Next, back out of the Play Store entirely and go into your phone's main settings app, then apps, then find Google Play Store specifically. Tap into mobile data and Wi-Fi, and toggle off background data if you want an even more aggressive restriction, understanding that this may occasionally delay update checks until you manually open the app. For most people, this step is optional, but for anyone who has already confirmed Play Services is unusually high on their battery usage screen, it's worth testing for a full day to see if the numbers actually move. Alongside that, tap into battery from that same app info screen and set it to optimized rather than unrestricted, which allows the system's own battery management to intervene when the Play Store tries to run excessive background cycles without fully blocking it from functioning when you actually need it. If you're someone who's noticed the drain specifically overnight, there's one more layer worth checking, and it has nothing to do with the Play Store's settings menu at all. It has to do with Play Protect, the built-in scanning system mentioned earlier. Inside the Play Store, tap your profile icon, then Play Protect, then the small settings gear in the corner. You'll typically find a toggle for scanning apps with Play Protect. And while turning this off entirely is not something security-conscious users should do lightly, simply being aware that this scan exists and that it can spike CPU usage right after new installs or on its own periodic schedule at least explains why your battery graph sometimes shows a strange, unexplained spike at 3 in the morning when you weren't even holding the phone. For anyone still seeing high play services drain after all of that, the next step is to actually go looking for the specific feature responsible rather than guessing. Inside Settings, go to Battery, then Battery Usage, and tap directly on Google Play services in that list. On Pixel devices, tap through to All Services, and on Galaxy devices, look for the detailed battery usage breakdown for that specific app. This will show you whether the drain is coming from location services, background sync, security scanning, or app updates specifically, rather than lumping everything into one vague number. If location is the dominant factor and you own a recent Pixel or Galaxy device, that's your signal this might be tied to the hardware-level GPS bugs currently being patched across both ecosystems, not something you misconfigured yourself. In that specific case, temporarily forcing your network preference to LTE instead of 5G, and tightening location permissions app by app to while using the app instead of always, has been the most consistently effective workaround reported so far, at least until the manufacturer side fixes fully roll out later this year. Now here's the bigger question worth sitting with, because this story was never really just about one hidden toggle in one settings menu. It's about how much of what drains your battery every single day is invisible by design, buried 3 or 4 menus deep, defaulted to the setting that benefits convenience and automatic delivery over your device's actual runtime, and never surfaced to you unless you go looking for it yourself. The Play Store auto-update setting is just the most common, most well-documented example, but it is very unlikely to be the only one. Every background sync feature, every automatic security scan, every silent preload of content you haven't asked for yet represents the same basic trade-off made on your behalf, by default, without your informed consent. And the timing of Google's own March 2026 crackdown on other developers doing exactly this kind of thing makes the irony impossible to ignore. The same company now publicly shaming third-party apps for keeping your phone awake in the background, dropping their rankings, slapping warning labels next to their install buttons, spent years quietly running comparable background cycles through its own flagship storefront app. Oh, the one every single Android user has installed. The one nobody thinks to audit because it feels too foundational, too official, too part of the operating system to question. Now that Google has built the tooling to detect this behavior at scale across millions of third-party apps, the obvious next question is whether that same scrutiny will ever be turned fully inward onto Google's own defaults with the same public transparency it now demands from everyone else. Until that happens, the responsibility sits with you, quietly, in a settings menu 3 taps deep, in an app you open every week without ever really looking at. The fix takes less than 5 minutes. The awareness that you needed to look in the first place is the part almost nobody has, until their battery starts dying for reasons they can never quite explain. And they finally go looking in the one place they never thought to check. Somewhere out there right now, a phone identical to yours is quietly downloading its 7th silent app update of the night, waking the radio, waking the processor, spending your battery on a decision you never actually made. The only question left is whether you're going to go check your own settings tonight, or whether you're going to wake up tomorrow and wonder, once again, where all that battery went.